I'm going to talk about 3 pieces of work that I did last year in Buckinghamshire, which is green leafy Buckinghamshire, if anybody knows it, which is I think the second most affluent borough in the UK. And I kind of conducted a service user consultation, which I'll tell you a bit more about. I'm going to look at the key findings that came out of that report, and also the recommendations. Then I'm going to go on to talk about a manual that I put together, which was a Mephedrone manual, in CAP, or Meow Meow, some people know it. And then a project called Off the Concrete, which was really a set of stories by users committed to camera on film. And I'm going to show 6 minutes of that footage at the end of the presentation. So I'm just getting used to this. Right, so service user consultation, it was commissioned by the Bucks Drug Action Team and conducted between September and December 2014 and kind of went into January. 84 problematic, what I call problematic non-opiate users were interviewed. And I didn't target recreational users at all within the report. It was primarily focused on problematic users, and I explain what I mean by problematic as we go through. And the areas that I kind of looked at in Buckinghamshire were Ellsbury and High Wycombe, which are the 2 main towns, and then Buckingham, Chesham and Burnham. Okay, so a range of organisations were kind of interviewed, or people from organisations were interviewed, so police, youth services, homeless projects, community engagement teams, Old Tea Warehouse, which is a supported housing project, and the engagement CAF, which was kind of a new idea. It's like a soup kitchen, but the idea was to try and engage users at the front end and not so much at the back end towards recovery. And Drug Fam, which is the family and carers organisation that covered the whole of Bucks. The sample, so I kind of devised short structured interviews, semi-structured interviews, and the reason I kept them short is I was trying to capture as many people as possible. So there's 121 respondents in total, 8 managers, 29 workers, and 44 users in services, and 40 users outside services. And what I mean by outside services, users that either had no contact with services whatsoever, or had dropped out, or were known by services. So key findings. So the objective was to look at non-opiate use. This is not NPS, not novel psychoactive substances. That wasn't the remit. It was to look at drugs that, that weren't heroin, or codeine, or morphine. Though heroin did come up, we'll talk about it in a bit. What came up was that the majority of users I interviewed were taking Mephedrone, the once the legal high that is now a Class B drug, and it was 54% of the respondents. And then it was cocaine, crack, MDMA, ketamine, and amphetamine. In fact, amphetamine was very low in Buckinghamshire. It seemed that Mephedrone, which is a stimulant, had taken the place of amphetamine. Secondary drugs of choice, the main secondary drugs of choice were alcohol, cannabis and heroin, and also novel psychoactive substances were taken as a secondary drug of choice by the majority of users that I interviewed. Remember, these are problematic users. And so 24% of that within the legal highs, 24% were using synthetic stimulants, and the majority were using synthetic cannabinoids as a secondary drug of choice, or when cannabis wasn't around. Drugs choice changed. So I also looked at patterns of use and whether their drugs of choice had changed within the past year. And 48% of users outside services in Ellsbury have switched to Mephedrone. And in Wycombe, which is like 20 miles down the road, the majority has switched to novel psychoactive substances. And I thought, well, why is that? Why isn't the same pattern happening in, like Buckingham or Cheshire? Why was there this different patterns in each town or village? Which I'll come to in a bit. I think one of the big issues around that is that there was a head shop in Wickham. I don't know if you know what a head shop is. You've got one in Norwich. Is it heads of it? And I think that was one of the big significant differences as well. Okay, routes of use. So 57%, majority of people snorted their drugs, or they smoked them. They took these drugs orally. And the staggering, I thought, 29% injected drugs. And if you can see here, the IV use, this is used as inside services. This is the injecting that was going on outside services. So in a sense, these injectors were not being captured by services. I thought, what is this cohort here? Because before I did the study, Neil McKinley from Glasgow had kind of stumbled upon a group of injectors in Ellsbury who were injecting Mephedrone prolifically. So I was kind of called back to really bottom out. So again, what was it about that group? So that group, it was like a cohort, and this is in Ellsbury, a cohort of injectors that were injecting, and there's no exaggeration here, because as I said, it's been evidence-based in different areas, injecting 20 to 50 times a day over 3 days. So some of these individuals were injecting themselves at that, within a session, 150 times within one session, 3-day session, without any food or any sleep. Some individuals were going for 12 to 20 grams of Mephedrone within a 24-hour period, which is staggering. They were reusing needles, admitted to sharing. Hep C was identified within the group. And a lot of these users were given tents to sleep in. They didn't have any accommodation. And what had happened was a tenting community had kind of erupted in Ellsbury. And this is where I think the sharing really started to happen. I went down there, like I say, openly sharing. They're actually dissolving the Mephedrone from puddles, the water from puddles. They were injecting the most unhygienic environments possible, tents. And they're injecting, like I say, prolifically, multiple times within tents. So places like Boots, the pharmacists, there was like a staggering 5-fold increase on the amount of needles being given out. There was like bags of needles found in bushes where people were stashing needles. And as some users were saying, a lot of the Mephedrone was like solidifying within the vein as well. And hence they were using things like vitamin C and citric acid to break down the Mephedrone. Mephedrone should dissolve easily in water. So there's just a whole range of issues here that we started to evidence-base and thought, well, how are we going to manage this? How do we, engage these users? Because these users were not coming into services at all. Safeguarding. The youngest injector was actually 17 years of age. He was a straight A student from a very affluent background. Safeguarding issues. There was also concern amongst the police and other services that sexual exploitation issues were apparent with young vulnerable females who were using Mephedrone. And again, a lot of the sexual favours were young people carrying out sexual favours for with other young people. So it's like young people on young people. A whole range of physical health issues are apparent. I mean, weight loss being most apparent, but also liver problems. But people who suffer strokes, heart attack. I had a guy who suffered a heart attack at 24 years of age, primarily from Mephedrone use. A whole range of psychiatric issues, some diagnosed, some undiagnosed. Again, the main ones were depression, anxiety, panic attacks, hallucination, schizophrenia. I mean, right like across the range. So, like I say, a lot of the users that I started to focus on were outside services, were not being engaged. The ones inside services I'm going to talk about in a bit. It was a different pattern. So, debt and housing issues is another thing I looked at. Rent arrears, court fines, debts to family members, most of the debts that users were carrying with them. Debts to dealers, debts to other users. And there was a clear stark difference. I think the thing that really stuck out from the report was that users inside services had tended to have some form of adequate housing, a roof over their head, and the users outside services either sleeping in tents or car parks, sofa surfing in cars, or as you'll see in public toilets. So most users for drug services and unrelated services were easy to access. So why weren't they coming in? Waiting times were not a barrier. So again, why weren't they coming in? What was the reason for them not coming in? 23% of users were just failing to make their appointments. And when I started to look, again, I can't name services, but things like open access, drop-ins, it wasn't about, everything was appointment based. And if you didn't buy your appointments, then you were struck off, in a sense. So the recommendations that came through. Right, so let's at strategic recommendations, a partnership approach. If just the issues that cover housing, health, psychiatric issue, one agency just could not cope with doing that. In fact, the ones that were being proactive were just kind of shooting in the dark because there was no overarching strategy. And so when we started to look at this strategy, well, it needed to be coherent. People really need to know, what was, to be reading from the same hymn sheet. But to be, what I mean by clear, if somebody came into your service, who do they get referred onto? Was there a clear pathway, not just for mephedrone users, but people that used new drugs, undetectable drugs or novel psychoactive substances? And why is it non-opiate? Because most of the drugs were non-opiates, and we have a strategy around opiates. We have a strategy around, heroin, but we don't have one really around non-opiates. And I was thinking about the future because here I'm focused on mephedrone. We might get hit with another drug in about two years from now. So that's why I thought a non-opiate strategy, a strategy for the future rather than for the here and now. And that's why I didn't say MPS, because they might be all banned next year or in the next couple of months. So, legal hires, I just thought, well, keep it non-opiate for now, anyway. A steering group. And so I thought that people nominated from each service could kind of set up a steering group so, it wouldn't fall off the agenda. And also, within that panel, there would be service users on that panel as well to push these issues forward. Key operational. It needed to be a targeted outreach team. I thought, I looked at the young people services and found that they were still carrying out outreach, going out to young people, and it was targeted. They'd have a map up and they could target all the hot spots. I thought, why isn't that happening with adults? Because in a sense, I found that a lot of services had become restricted. They couldn't go out there. So crisis intervention work wasn't really being done. The crisis loan had been removed, so I don't know if you know about this, there's no immediate help for people that are in trouble. There wasn't a night shelter in the area, and also we kind of looked at the bloodborne viruses, infection control, and needle exchange service. There wasn't a needle exchange in Ellsbury, and hence people were going to pharmacies to get their needles. So in the end, something that became a drug issue for me became more of a housing and a health issue. And a public health issue with that as well. So the manual. So I kind of kept the manual originally specific to mephedrone. Because I feel that mephedrone in certain areas, especially across the Thames Valley, is one of the main drugs being used. Well, I'd say it's one of the main drugs being used for a start. At the moment. I know there's other areas in the country like Gloucester, Bradford, and a few places up in the north where there's been outbreaks of what they call prolific mephedrone injected. So why this drug? Crack, for instance. Crack is lasts 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes. And if you inject that, it might last 10, 15 minutes. Now we thought that, if crack users start to inject, they're going to start injecting 10 to 15 minutes. How many needles will we need to give out? But it never happened. It never really took off with crack. And I'm thinking, why mephedrone? So when I started to look at the spends, 12 to 20 grams of mephedrone. There's someone paying 280 quid for that. Now, if that was cocaine or crack, you couldn't do it. I mean, 20 grams of cocaine, even at £50 a gram. Where were they going to get that kind of money? So in a sense, the ceiling was off. There isn't that, I think in a sense, the money was kind of putting a lid on this before with crack and cocaine users. But with mephedrone, it's so cheap. And it's these cheap synthetic drugs are the ones you're going to start seeing in the future. So the manual. It's out now. It's on the Bucks website. I can send you it as well. I covered the history, looked at mephedrone, the whole history of mephedrone, the different types of cathinones. It comes from a family of cathinones. Looked at all the possible combinations, what were happening in the area, mephedrone and alcohol, mephedrone and heroin, and just literally broke down all the combinations that we came across, and even some of it prescribed medication. I looked at how it works on the brain, and it works exactly the same as cocaine and amphetamine and crack. It works on dopamine, serotonin, adrenaline. It stimulates adrenaline throughout the body, just like cocaine. So, in a sense, mephedrone was not a mysterious drug. You know, I think we know quite a lot of the consequences of this drug now, the adverse effects, and it's very much like any other stimulant. But like I say, there are differences. This is a vasoconstrictor, and so we looked at harm reduction. Sites take longer to heal than normally, so this is why you see increased vein damage when somebody's injecting mephedrone. And so, again, when I looked at the harm reduction mechanisms on IV use, we're looking at snorting and smoking as well, and all that information is within that as well. And again, that information has been evidence-based. So, treatment tools, we've also devised treatment tools, how to work with mephedrone users, looking at triggers and cravings, euphoric recall, etc., etc. I adapted a lot of that stuff from cocaine and crack, and adapted it towards mephedrone. I didn't think I needed to reinvent the wheel. Like I say, a lot of these new drugs, I don't think, are mysterious. So they're either downers, they're stimulants. So it's stimulants, depressants, hallucinogens. They're the same categories that we've always been using. They don't break out of those categories. And so for me, it's not about, these drugs are around, we don't know what to do with them, let's ban them. I'm like, these drugs are here, we need to know about them, because how do we devise our harm reduction strategies? How do we devise treatment to unknown drugs? And so I always think about we need to go back to the drugs, but understand them, look at the behaviours, and then we devise our interventions towards that. You'll see at the back of the manual, I tried to adapt interventions, treatment tools, to the whole range of NPS that are on the market. I think the real area that is a very difficult area is the synthetic cannabinoids. They span 7 or plus chemical families. They are not consistent. And I'm sure you've been reading the papers about prisons and people fitting within the prisons, their throats swelling up after smoking synthetic cannabinoids, having strokes. And then in Lincoln, where I've been working, there's a joke, black mamba, spice, used to be drugs that were very, synthetic cannabinoids that were very prevalent in prisons. They're not around anymore, but there are other synthetic cannabinoids in there. But the joke is, somebody has a fit in the cell, call the ambulance. I don't know if you've heard of this, and it's literally a joke that goes around, oh, another one's gone, another one's had a fit, call the ambulance. So again, synthetic cannabinoids, they are synthetic cannabinoids, it's not cannabis, there's no THC in any of these products. And I just looked at the toolkit that came out. I don't know if you've looked at this synthetic cannabinoid toolkit for prisons, and I'm not quite sure about it at all. I don't see it as a working document or working manual for users. So my next stage is to write a manual for synthetic cannabinoids. So, what came out of the reports over and over again, and what users kept saying, was that, services, they've got great knowledge of drugs, maybe not so much of the new drugs, You know, they're very approachable, there's no waiting time, but they just don't understand the lifestyle that I lead. And I thought, lifestyle? Yeah, well, what lifestyle do you lead? And I was kind of given, like, literally 8 weeks to go out there with a camera and film people's stories. And I met, I kind of knew that what I wanted to do was hand over the camera, because I was literally doing it on the mobile phone at first. The sound on the mobile phones is terrible, even on the iPhone. So I thought, I need to get a camera, a cheap one, second-hand place, buy a camera. But as I was kind of going out on the street, I met a guy called Jim. I'll say his name, he wants me to say his name. Jim was sleeping in the back of it was like a youth club, but it had been closed out. He was basically sleeping on a wet mattress. And I took him in, we had a coffee, chatted to him, told him about this project. And he was like, yeah, I've got a bit of background in photography and all that kind of stuff. And I went over, well, met him a couple of times, and then went over to the second-hand place, put on the camera, handed over the camera, and it had the kind of the memory card in there. And I said, look, Jim, I know things can be, because it's, crack and heroin, and Mephedrone. And I was like, look, Jim, I know if it gets too hard, you might want to, sell that camera, but at least get the memory card so I can keep hold of the footage. Jim came, and everybody's like, oh, I just handed over the camera. You're never going to see Jim again. And Jim came back. He came back the next day with loads of footage, and he kept coming back regularly. And so we started. All I started to do was put the footage, film together. It was their story. I'm literally just editing it. Jim gets interested in editing, and he's working with Final Cut Pro with me. And thinks like, do you know what? He's off the street now. He's got his own place. And he called me 2 days ago, and he's doing a 2-year creative media course at college, just on the back of this. So I'm thinking, off the concrete, I've handed everything over to Jim now. This is Jim's project and not mine. And I'm saying to Jim that maybe this is something that can get people literally off the concrete. So it was a collaborative piece of work. Like I say, I was going to anonymise everything, and they told me to keep the real names. They want to be seen. They're sick of being unheard. Yeah? And the story was originally about Mephedrone. It completely went off Mephedrone. I was just looking at their day-to-day routine, what people do on the street. Remember, most of these people were homeless. So it took me down the homeless route. And I'm not, I've never done work with the homeless population. But I found that the day routine, lack of sleep, no running water, nowhere to wash their teeth, nowhere to do their CV. They're on job seekers allowance, and they seem to be in treatment. Some of these people are in recovery, and like I say, they're sleeping on the street. So there was loads of these issues, and also I looked at the cost to the individual. Buying milk on a daily basis, buying food on a daily basis, it's actually quite expensive to be homeless. They're buying drugs at the top price as well, for the poorest quality, so they're paying top dollar for their drugs and their food and their washing. They're going through their dry run very, very quickly. So being on homeless is not a cheap option to the individual and to wider society. People going in and out of prisons for stealing cereal bars or Mars bars because they're hungry. Yeah? And also I looked at the cost of the borough, not to prevent homelessness, to hide it, to push it away. It's in fact, I think, more expensive to push this issue away than to actually deal with it. Yeah? So for one small cost, car park attendants, they were sleeping in car parks between 4 o'clock in the morning to about 7 because it was unattended. So Bucks County Council extended the contracts for the car parks attendants for those extra 3 hours. This is right across the borough, and I kind of worked out that was about £60,000 extra. And I thought that would have been great if you, instead of using the car park attendants, you could put that £60,000 into a project like this. So that's what I'm kind of looking at the moment, is maybe other ways, creative ways, to try and help people. And this is something that's just happened organically with me. It's not something that I was focused on at all. So, am I done nearly 25? Shall I just phone 6 minutes for the footage? Yep. All right, so I'm going to put the clip on. If you've got any questions, I'll take them after. Is that okay?
It's hard for me to walk through the town centre from one side to the other without bumping into a known user or somebody offering me something or giving me a phone number of where to get something. So it's very hard.
So this is the place where I used to call home. So I'll show you around, I'll show you what a typical homeless person has to put up with on a daily basis. This was my only shelter from the rain and all those harsh conditions that homeless people are have to face with. So every night here I'd have about 2 hours maximum sleep. It's not a place you'd be comfortable calling home. You wouldn't be bringing girlfriends back here and all that kind of thing. Before I moved here there was a bed here, there was a mattress here, completely soaked. That's the mattress there. You see for yourself, prior to me being here there was someone else having to sleep on that. Dean, tell us about your story.
Became homeless November last year, so 11 months ago. Me and my girlfriend, we rented a property, our arrears mounted up, and we were subsequently made homeless.
It's the kind of thing that can so easily happen to anyone, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I never ever thought I'd be homeless, but when it happens, you know, there's no preparation for it. We were literally woken up early one Saturday afternoon, kicked out with our bags there and then, so there was no
simple,
preparation.
isn't it?
Yeah.
I had a property for about 5.5 years. I was living with my boyfriend. Unfortunately, we got onto MCAT because I was sick of being on Mephedrone for 20 years. They said, this is the new answer, go on to MCAT. Willing at first, but we didn't know what we knew now. I've now got a big ulcer, half my calf's missing, been in hospital 13 times. Like I say, I had the property for 5.5 years. Going on MCAT, we destroyed the place. It sent us mental, basically. We lost one of our good friends on it. He was the first person to die. I lost my house. It's just growing back. I lost my hair. We got sores all over us. Dean's now got to have a heart operation because one of his valves is not working.
Me personally, I've got a couple of medical issues, and if I was off the street, for one, I could address those medical issues better. For instance, something simple like changing a bandage, finding somewhere to go to change your bandage. You know, I've got a wound on my leg. I don't want people to see that, and people don't want to see that.
How did you become homeless?
Broke up with my partner, and it was a joint flat, but I had to let it go because I couldn't afford it.
And they didn't give you any options, just
No.
kick you out on the street?
Yeah, just put me on the street, yeah.
I could rebuild my life if I had somewhere stable to go. That's the key for me. Personally, I need to be able to get a good night's sleep. I need somewhere I can recuperate and allow my body to heal. Somewhere I can sit and rewrite my CV in peace and quiet. To apply for jobs, to try and rebuild family ties.
Tell us about where you sleep, what are the conditions like?
I normally sleep Whitehill on the benches or Vale Park on the bench.
Yeah. So it's obviously quite cold at the minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got no shelter.
No.
We could be of use to society if given the chance. And if we've got some sort of platform, some sort of base to build upon, then, you know, there's hope for everybody. Well, we stumbled across this place completely by accident. The door was left open one day. As you can see, it's nothing wrong with the public toilet. This is the main bathroom. Here's where I keep all my cushions and everything. We have to be very careful when we go out, not to let the door latch shut, otherwise we can't get back in. And obviously we don't want to break in because then we're going to be breaking the law, breaking and entering. As such, because we leave the door and the window open as we are, we can actually let ourselves in without doing any damage to the place. And literally we just here, we sleep, we get up in the morning, we're out all day. Behind this door is where we keep all our cushions and stuff like that. We try and keep everything neat and tidy and out of everybody else's way, so it's all tucked out of the way, so we're not a nuisance to anybody. And the other bathroom is where we actually sleep, because there's slightly more room in this bathroom. We're quite lucky, as you can see it's en suite. We've got our bags and stuff in here at the moment. There isn't normally half as much stuff there, it's just that big bag there is actually our washing. So I'll be taking that to the laundrette with my gyro tomorrow. and that represents a large portion of my gyro gone, because I can spend up to £15 in the laundrette quite easily washing and tumble drying clothes.
This is the kitchen.
Yeah, this is our kitchen.
That's the kitchen.
See, we've got a little travel kettle. I mean, we're very lucky to have electric, but obviously it's not like this is our home. We're here for maybe 8 hours a night, absolute maximum. I was a manager of a waste management company. I led a team of 5 people rolling out new business. I never for 1 second thought I'd end up homeless, but unfortunately, as a result of addiction and maybe a victim of circumstance to a degree, things just spiralled out of control, and once it starts, it's a very hard ride to get off. So I used to look at homeless people and think myself that they were a nuisance, they were a risk, maybe break into my car or, you know, my home. And it's only now, through being in this situation myself, that I've got a greater awareness and appreciation of what those poor people were going through. I'd like to think I'm in a better place now than I was 12 months ago, and hopefully in 12 months' time I'll be a better place than I am now. But obviously we can't do everything without a little bit of assistance and maybe a leg up in places. But ultimately the key is we're not bad people.